Welcome back to another episode of Health is Wealth. And thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. And as always, I am beyond grateful and thankful from the bottom of my heart to each and every one of you who is tuning into today's episode and also into this podcast. And I truly hope this brings you value, as every week I am dropping a new episode on Sunday, just sharing words and thoughts of things that I'm learning on my own journey in life. Some things for the first time, other things just seeing in a different view. And again, in hopes that it brings some sort of value into your life, either to help inspire you, motivate you, and if anything, just get a chance to know who I am and the quest and journey that I am on in my own life. And what I wanted to talk to you today about was a question I wanted to actually ask. And are you a victim or a victor of your life circumstances? Thinking about this, right? It's a reminder that things happen in life that we don't have any control over, right? If we take it from the beginning, we didn't get to choose how we were born, the family we grew up in, how we grew up, things of that nature. And the one thing that you realize as you get older is, we're not always dealt the most fairest of cards. And that's just the way that we've understood and learned life to be. Some people have had more tough situations than other people. But, with that all being said, when I think about this, now that I'm older and I look back and, had a chance to see other people and their lives, and some who, again, maybe didn't have the fairest of situations growing up, that they had the best, cards dealt to them. But, one thing that you really notice is that there were some people, even with misfortune or tragic things that happened in their life, et cetera, they somehow still figured out a way to live through brighter days, to get to the other side of it, right? And, there are those who, it's almost like a crutch, a handicap, these situations that happen to them. An example, sometimes people still blame into their adulthood that the reason they're not making money, the reason they're not well off is because of how they grew up, because, there's always an external blame. And I guess what I'm really trying to get with this, it reminds me that in anything that we're ever dealt with in life, there's two choices we always have. And it's either that we can be a victim or a victor of it. And, one of those will allow your life to essentially an improvement in some sort of fashion. And the other will just paralyze you, bring you further back, bring you down. Now, we can't control, right, what happens in our life. We can't control situations that occur for the most part, things that happen, et cetera. But I believe we can always choose how we move on from them. Each situation difficult that we have the ability to either allow that situation to make us or to break us. And so there goes that idea of being either a victim or a victor of a life, because one half of people in society will, have a situation happen to them and, look at it like, well, I can't go forward. I can't do this now because X and Y happened to me in life. Therefore, justifying, invalidating why, I'm not able to move on or move past or get better from this. While there's another half that will decide to be a victor of that circumstance and decide in a moment that the situation does not define them. It's, how they move on from it, how they process it, how they allow a situation to make them better, that they then decide that, I'm going to be a victor from this. The situation is not going to break me. I'm going to let it make me. And I think there's a world of difference between the two. And that's the ability and choice that we all have. And I understand there are some very, bad things that have happened in some people's lives, right? That again, they didn't want to happen, didn't control it, had no choice, But I believe the choice is always that, is that we either let a situation define who we are, define our life, paralyze us, handicap us, or we let situations, be the thing to prove why we're so strong, to prove why we can still make it. And I think that's the difference between some people who thrive and some people who are just barely surviving. And we all know those kind of people, right? I always look at everybody's situation and realize, again, not everybody had a fair situation. That's just life. But there are some people who have had worse life than others, and still have figured out a way to get to better places in life, to not let their situations dictate, how they're going to navigate the rest of their days. But for those who, allow the situations to break them, you always find the blame game when it comes to that. I would be a little bit, more wealthy or well off if I didn't grow up in a poor family, if the economy wasn't this way, if so-and-so wasn't president, whatever it was, and there are some people who could, have had nothing going on, been poor, been this, been that, and still find a way to make something of themselves, to succeed, to be well off, to be all of that. And so I think deciding between the two is going to be a difference in the world in how you move forward, right? Because people who are victim of situations, they don't play the blame game. They take responsibility and accountability for their life, not necessarily for the bad things that happen to them, but for the sake of saying that, okay, this thing happened. It's unfortunate. I wish it didn't happen, but it's life and it happened. Someone's probably dealing with worse than I have, but I can either let this thing sink me or I can swim and become stronger from it. And when you have that kind of mentality and you decide to be victors from, things that just happen in your life that go sideways, situations that have occurred, you pretty much say to the universe, to the world, to God, to society that, the situation is I'm bigger than that. I'm not going to let this thing capsize me and put me in a chokehold, because I'm better than it. I'm stronger than that. I'm not going to be a victim of that. I'm not going to let it, be the reason that I'm not going to move forward. And, I look at that in my own life and a lot of things that have happened and a lot of, not so good things that have happened in so many different situations. And it's easy, let's say, right, to play the victim, to play, that card, because when you start, pointing, the blame to situations for you not moving forward, then, you're looking for other things to fix, whatever may be wrong and to make things better. And that's just never going to happen, And so for my own self, in my own journey, my own life, I look back at everything now and be like, to some people, those kind of things would be crutches. To some people, those kind of things people would be victims of and say, well, I can't be a better person. I can't do this now. I can't live that way because of X, Y, and Z that happened in my life. But I look at all those things and realize that if I allow myself to be a victim of everything, then I've only become a slave to a past situation, to a current situation, and there's no way for me to get better from that, And so I've learned to become victors of my situation, to be like, if I've been able to endure everything that I've gone through, it's only made me stronger because I'm still here today. It'll only continue to make me stronger because life will continue to go on. And no matter what, the time is still going to be spent. And so you can either spend that time playing the woo-hoo, boo-hoo's me card. And again, I understand there are some extremely unfortunate things that happen to people, but no one's special. Everybody's had bad things and worse things happen to them. And some people still figure out a way to get over that and push past that and not be a victim of it, and be victors from it. And so really just a question for you, are you a victim or a victor in life? Because regardless of what happens that we can't control, what we can control are our emotions. What we can control are our thoughts. What we can control are what things grab a hold of us and what things we break away from. And if you could play that victor card instead of the victim card, I think you can find that, difficult situations, past, circumstances in your life could only fuel this fire more for you to want to succeed, for you to prove to the world, to yourself, that nothing's going to hold you back. Nothing is going to hold you down, even though you've had some bad things happen to you, right? And unfortunately, you can't erase things that have been done or, again, can't plan for the bad things that come. But it's a difference between sinking or swimming, And if you're a victim, you're always going to sink because, when you allow situations to grab a hold of you, grab a hold of your thoughts, paralyze you, handicap you, then you have no way to heal. You have no way to close. You have no way to move on and become the next better version of yourself. But when you use a victor mindset, you say, hey, it's done. It happened. I can't control it, but I can't control how I move on from it. And I can't control how I let it define me. And I'm not going to let it break me. I'm not going to let it weaken me. I'm only going to use that situation to make me stronger. And so I try to think about that through everything I go through, because again, life is unfair. Things are going to happen. There's just no way around it. But what there is a way around is how you process it, how you move on from it, and how you allow it to affect you in your life. So ask yourself and remind yourself in every situation, are you going to be a victim or a victor of it? Thank you so much for tuning into another week's episode, and I will see you on the next one.